Afternoon, everyone. I think there's a small technical error on Vikram's films, which should hopefully come on in a post our conversation if we have time. We're very privileged and honored to have Dr. Yannick Lintz here and Vikram Goyal. Vikram Goyal, as you were introduced, is a pioneering artist who's been doing exceptional work with metalware particularly. And Dr. Yannick, I'm sorry we dragged you back to India within a week of you being here. She was here with President Macron last week, and now she's back again to be part of the art fair. And we're really honored and privileged that you're here. What's really special about this conversation is that we are looking at the arts of the Silk Road. When you're at India Art Fair and you're particularly looking at the arts of a subcontinent, the fact that you have an opportunity to try and connect this to the larger world is something really exceptional. And it is befitting that Dr. Yannick is here with us because her museum in Paris represents the best of these Silk Road arts. And I think some of the finest examples of countries from the Silk Road, especially the eastern end of things, is in her museum. And Vikram, of course, has been looking at art forms of a great variety and kind and has decided to take the plunge and do something really remarkable with the Silk Road wall that he has created at his pavilion booth, which I'm sure most of you have already seen. Dr. Yannick, I'm going to try and get this conversation going with you. All of you get a chance to see the map behind us. It gives you a sense of the context of where the Silk Road is, what the Silk Road is, and how does it connect all of us. Dr. Yannick, I'm very curious to know that with the kind of treasures that you have in your museum, what is the contemporary sense of the Silk Road arts that you see? I mean, you travel extensively, you see a lot of these countries and cultures. Do you still see them creating the kind of artifacts as we historically knew about them?
First of all, I think when we speak about Silk Road is a recent concept. Of course, when we talk about Silk Road on an art historian point of view, we have to go back to the first centuries, around 6th, 7th century. And in fact, at those times, we never in archives speak about Silk Roads. Silk Road is a romantic concept born in Germany during the 19th century. So, because it's a concept, of course, what is the concept for the present and the past? And I think the map can symbolize more or less what are we speaking about when we speak about the Silk Road concept. Of course, we speak about the idea that art can be inspired on a road between the East and the West. But when we say a road, you see on this map, there are in fact many roads, many Silk Roads. One going north, more or less from China through Central Asia, through Persia or Iran, and to the west. Another one going more south through the sea, but it's also a Silk Road in the way that art goes with iconographical influences, technical influences, artist trips from the east of the west. So this idea is also available for the roads going south, of course, and you see India here. And usually when we say Silk Road, in the past or in the present, the idea, I don't know here, for me it's interesting to hear you from the Indian point of view, but from a European point of view, it's always the idea of silk going from China through Central Asia to Iran and to Mediterranean. But I think it's more and more modern concept to think about Silk Road, silk, not only silk, of course, but what about India in this story? And if we go in detail, we can see that there is a real story of a Silk Road going between China and India to Persia, or of course Persia coming with the Mughal Empire here.
No, that makes perfect sense when you look at the larger story of the Silk Road and the way different countries contextualize this. But we come back to Vikram, and this is something that I've asked you in previous conversations as well. What is the hold that the Silk Road has on artists, designers, and the fact that you keep going back to it as a remarkable space of creativity? What is it about the Silk Road that draws you into wanting to create something from it?
Well, in general, the Silk Route is a number of places connected by these routes, each with their very own distinctive visual and cultural histories. And we've looked at Italy, Turkey, Iran, India, Japan, and China. And if you throw in Central Asia and all their collective arts, it's a very rich tapestry and bank for inspiration for designers. It was also so, as Silk Route was not just about movement of goods, it was a movement of ideas and beliefs, religion, cultural practices. Pietro Dore Inlay came to India from Italy for the Taj Mahal. So you had a number of these ideas. And in a divided world of today, it's a very fresh and encouraging to have this cultural collaborations, the idea of where you had a mutual admiration of cultural ideas of different countries and imbibing that. 20 years ago, you had this international celloist, Yo-Yo Ma, who set up Silk Road Org for bringing artists together from different parts of the lands, just as an ode to cultural harmony and a respect for each other's cultural systems. So there's a lot in this whole, I don't think there's any other kind of network of collective visual history and cultures which are so rich for inspiration for designers.
So it sort of naturally became a corollary for you to want to try and explore.
Well, you know, for the art fair, this big wall, 30 feet, and I wanted to do something in our signature work of repoussé, and I wanted, rather than building one big tapestry, I wanted to do something three-dimensional. And we'd already been working with Chinese and Japanese motifs of trees, bamboo and sakura, etc., on vessels. And I was a bit tired of looking at kind of ideas only from India and wanted to move out. And I found the whole idea of kind of reimagining the Silk Route very romantic and taking this virtual tour of the Silk Route through elements. And rather than look at objects, I looked at paintings. And I was particularly captivated by this, it was an 19th century Japanese screen of the flowering sakura in spring. It was a beautiful 6-panel screen with the sakura blossoming with irises and peonies and birds. And then there was this wonderful 13th century screen of bamboo. It's called Bamboo on the Rocks, yeah, by Lee Khan. And then in India, we looked at the Kadamba Champa from a Pichwai. So there were a number of paintings. So it was very interesting looking at all these paintings and drawing from Italy. You had the pines and then the olive tree from Turkey and pomegranate. So it was very rich research for us. And then we threw in the vessels, which were a metaphor for trade, a movement of ideas, and it just gave a more three-dimensional aspect to it. So it's been, so it was quite a Herculean task putting this all together.
Well, you've achieved it beautifully.
Thank you.
Sure, please.
No, what I think by hearing you also is I think that in art influence there are two stories. The one is the road, the story of the road, and by hearing you, you are clearly in this type of influence. And we can also share together that contemporary art on certain point of view in painting, in video, etc., is a global culture, which is not the story of the road. And I think that what is interesting with the story of the Silk Road, it's first of all a commercial road. That means also the merchant bringing by camels and now, of course, ships and other type of cars, etc. They are bringing material objects, and so it's really the idea of images or material going from one place to another to inspire the artist. It's not a global culture. It's really a story between East and West. It doesn't include, for instance, the United States.
Yeah, so it's a different conversation. But that brings me back to the question, and this is something that I've always wondered. Since you hold so many important Silk Road artifacts in your museum, do you find contemporary designers coming to look at them, to get inspired, especially those who cannot physically travel or go see these?
For us, it's very important that the museum has to be an inspiration for artists. It's a place of creation, and of course we try to be very active to welcome artists. And if you want to come to Musée Guimet or other artists, you are welcome. Two examples of active collaboration with artists in fashion. For example, the artistic director of Dior, she is Spanish, but she is fascinated by Indian textiles. And as you know, maybe we have the most important collection made by Krishna Ribou, and which is now in the museum. So we have almost every week she comes and take time in the storage. She wants to see those Indian textiles, and she is inspired by this. And my wish once is to organize, of course, fashion celebration of Indian textile inspiration in those type of creation by Dior. Another one, we are in the beginning of this process. We have in Paris, we call it in French, Haute École de la Joaillerie, so it's for the jewelry, like Cartier, etc. So, of course, Paris is well known for a place of creation. And they welcome more and more Asian artists, and every year another artist. This year it will be a Chinese one, Anna Hu. And we decided together with the school to devote it the third year of the training to come to the museum, to be inspired by the museum. And I see some birds in your creation that could be inspired from some furniture in the museum. So they will come all over the year, and the winner will have an exhibition of its creation next to the objects that inspired him or her.
Yeah.
So it's two examples, but this link is very important.
And just as a background for a few of you who may not know about Krishna Ribou, was this extraordinary Indian lady who lived in France, who collected and amassed one of the greatest collections of both Indian and Chinese textiles. All of us in India look at her Indian textiles, but we don't realize that she actually focused a great deal more on Chinese textiles. And probably the largest Baluchari sari collection is at the Guimet now, across all its formats, kinds, which are, I mean, some of the examples are things that you cannot even see in India anymore. But looking at that connection, the fact that Guimet has access to such a large body of work and constantly getting a space for designers to come, look, get inspired. While we're talking about materiality, Vikram, my question to you is that in your practice, you use such a rich repository of Indian metal skills across different kinds and formats. Do you sometimes use skills that come from other Silk Road countries, or is your design from, or is your inspiration from them more only for a pattern or a motif? Or is the metal skill itself something that you consider when you're looking at your work?
Well, the metal skills, one thing to note is when we work in metal, we work in sheet metal. And most of the metal working studios around the world work in casting. So they have molds and they pour metal into it and work. We get our raw material in rolls of brass, and we then hammer it, beat it, and make three-dimensional forms out of it. And this is a skill which we've developed. We've had a history of metalworking in India, and let's take repoussé, for example. You had decorative vessels and decorative ceilings and doors in temples, but they were of a particular kind of, say, Mughal flowers, and it was very limited in kind of the repertoire of design. And we have made them through a series of sampling, get used to doing a different language, like what you saw in Silken Passage. They weren't used to making sakura trees or bamboos, and this has come with a lot of experimentation. So the skill is homegrown. We've not imported the skill from anywhere else. We are kind of just taking our own knowledge and taking it to a different level, and that goes in other forms of metalworking itself. But the forms and patterns are very, for the studio in general, are, there's a lot of our collection which is very inspired by the brutalist period in America of the 70s, and there's of mid-century modernism, 60s, 70s, Italy, France, the United States. And a lot of our collection of organic, the free-flowing pieces come from that period. So I'd say the inspirations are more form-related and style-related than actually craft-related.
So when you're particularly looking at craft-related styles or even a pattern or a design, do you sometimes fear a tag of cultural appropriation when you take in a design, language, idiom, vocabulary from a different region, or is it something that gets transformed into something?
Well, let's look at, again, Silken Passage, and we've looked at all these paintings. And one thing is when we take a motif or a pattern or an idea, by the time the design is crunched through our various systems, the whole, the new form has very little semblance to the original. And second is just in terms of the materiality, because brass has such a special sheen to it. By the time, and the workers and this very skilled craftsman has put their magic to it, you kind of have your own imaginary landscape. So when you look at Silken Passage, it doesn't look that it's come out of a set of 6 different paintings. It all looks like it belongs together as one family. And we're always very careful of treating all these subjects with a lot of respect and giving homage to where they've come from. So it's not like we're saying, this is not Silken Passage, or this is not from Italy or Iran.
At the Guimet, currently, actually, we have 2 very interesting exhibitions going on. One is from Japan, the Tales of Genji story, and I particularly refer here to the lovely textile display of a master artist homage to the Tales of Genji in the way it was woven. It's a contemporary work done over a last period of about 34 years, if I'm not mistaken. Those textiles were made. And at the top floor of the Guimet, if any of you goes to Paris, you have the Indian artist Manish Pushkale, whose works are on display. Now, contemporary artists like this, when you involve them, bring them to the Guimet, is it more to talk about the continuing dialogue, or is it to connect it back to what you already have in the museum, because you have such a historic legacy of Japanese, Chinese, Indian art in your museum? Or is it, how does that work?
As you may know, I was appointed as president last year, end of 22. So I thought about a new policy of including artists in this museum. Of course, Musée Guimet is an Asian art museum. So as an Asian art museum, we have to show and to acquire, acquisition is also very important, art from more or less the beginning, from prehistoric time until today. So for this kind of policy or exhibition, we have to tell art history of the 21st century. So we have to find link. A link can be the techniques, can be the iconography, etc. But one of my obsession is, we can see it here and everywhere in the world, contemporary art has something also in rupture with the past. Right. And Musée Guimet has to show this also. It's a conversation I often have with Laurent Lebon, the president of Centre Pompidou. What's the place of more complete contemporary, Asian contemporary art in Musée Guimet? For instance, Musée Guimet, for those who knows it, or you could see the short film, you have small galleries. But for me, a large part of contemporary creation is also monumental. For example. So I would like also to bring to the museum, and you will see it next April if you come in the museum. We will, I asked to a Chinese designer, Xiong'er, living in Shanghai, to do something monumental on the facade. And so also to bring the event and the creation not only inside the galleries, which is in fact very classic, but for me to bring the present outside the museum. And so it will be a big surprise, I think. And I would like to do it with every year with other artists. And so that means that Musée Guimet is not only the place to show a tradition going on in the present, but to show all type of creation. It has to be the place that show the Asian art creation. And so we have to find solution ways, not only in the galleries, but outside, on the terrace, on the roof, and so.
So multiple forms of engagement across people, yes. Vikram, before we actually start showing the film, why did you feel the need to make a film on your practice, on your Karkhana, which is a studio very much like how it would be done in the medieval times, where so many artisans come together working towards one goal? What made you want to do a film at this point of time?
Well, we actually wanted to do a film on repoussé work. And it was during making of the film that my friend, and she's on the film, Annapurna Garimela, the design historian, talked about the idea of it being a workshop, which you then seconded in our last conversation about this workshop being during the Mughal period. So just to note, I'm not a designer by training, and nor am I an artisan, and I kind of occupy this third space where we have this workshop. And the workshop has engineers and artisans and product designers and all other kinds of the whole apparatus. And you are allowed to take risks. If you go to a well-known vendor or factory, they won't experiment they'll only experiment up to a point, and then they'll say, now give us your order. So your own workshop allows you to sample to any level you want, stretch the boundaries of what you're doing, and also think on scale. All of those interventions, which we've actually managed to do under this umbrella, we've been defined by ourselves as a workshop. So, so actually the film started at the idea of on repoussé and inadvertently being on the workshop.
Guys, what's the scene on the film? Are we able to watch it now? Okay,
Great.
so let's do that and then get back to conversation with the audiences as well. Come.
The karkhana is the traditional model of many people coming together, metalsmiths coming together and setting up a process. Vikram's biggest intervention is to set up a karkhana like this. What he has done is set up a studio that is a bridge between the karkhana and a designer's studio.
In India, everyone is a designer, from your local housewife going to the tailor, to the local artisan bringing some new creation, to the person bringing chairs and muras. It was very much in our culture to venture into design, even though there was no formal training. I grew up in Delhi and spent a lot of time in Rajasthan, both with very strong history and culture and heritage, the temples, the forts, the objects, the museums. And that richness has carried through my own design vocabulary. So while my aesthetic is contemporary, it is very rooted in legacy. Even the material I choose to work with, brass, it's an old traditional material, and there's a richness to it.
There's this love of gold in South Asia, the gold quality, and brass is not a substitute for gold, but it's part of that spectrum of the gold aesthetic. It's not a pure metal, and that's what makes it such an interesting material. And yet it is used for moments where more purity is required. And that makes it a culturally very interesting material.
Repoussé for me is very special. Equal amount of time is spent ideating on the design and the concept as it is on the making of the repoussé artwork. Once the design is conceived, it is mapped digitally, printed in paper, which have different codings to represent the different depths we want, is pasted on sheets of tempered metal, which are then placed in the reverse onto beds of wax.
Repoussé technique involves a metal sheet being laid on a support. What that support is made out of is a wax compound. It's a blend of materials, including mustard oil, and it's cooked literally to become the right consistency. It's called different names in different parts of India. Here it's called ral.
ये राल है, ये इसको पकड़ करती है, इसकी जुगलबंदी है कि ये पकड़ लेती है, इसको अपने अंदर ऑब्जेक्ट कर लेती है, चिपका लेती है, और फिर हम इसके ऊपर कारीगरी अपना हुनर, अपना फन दिखाते हैं. कारीगरी हमारी तो है ही, मगर इस सबसे बड़ी कारीगरी इस राल की है.
The metal and the wax support sort of couple with each other till they have to be separated. But the memory of that support is what gives brass its character. It holds the story of the support in the final product. Like all craft, the way to work with the material is completely embodied. People know this more familiarly in drawing, because if you exhale a jagged breath or inhale jaggedly while you're drawing, your line comes out jaggedy. There's always this question of managing the energy in the craftsman's body, and breath being the energy, as they wield the hammer and the chisel.
So there's a great dynamic play between how much pressure is applied on one part because it is at the expense of its neighboring areas. And this is where the skill of an artisan comes into play. And it also tells us that no piece comes out exactly the way the designer imagined it, because there's no way the designer can guess how much pressure is going to be applied, which makes each piece unique and special. And that's the beauty of repoussé. I've chosen to work with the idea of chakras, which are concentric circles denoting nodes of energy across our physical, mental, and spiritual worlds, and how if one plane is blocked, it affects the other. And these can be alleviated through breathing, meditation. So even in these very abstract organic forms of repoussé, it's linked to ancient Indian text and legacy.
When Vikram started working with his large limited edition panels, and then he was doing this literally larger than life sort of stories in his panels, it blew me away. If you look at some of his bigger repoussage panels, Sometimes I call it poetry. You'll find that the clouds are oriental, but you have then the peacocks, dancing peacocks, which are so Indian. And then he'll embellish it with something. And of course, all this embellishment is a new thing. I think it's the way to go,
काम का जो मसला है सबसे खतरनाक ये है कि यहाँ पे जो काम है एंटीक है, इंग्लिश काम। ये बहुत ही हटके काम है, हर कोई इसको कर नहीं सकता। वो बड़े-बड़े जो सही टॉप लेवल पे काम करने वाले ना, एक दफा को वो भी सोचते हैं कि ये काम होगा कैसे। कागज पे बनाने में आसान है, मगर पीतल पे बनाने में बड़ा मुश्किल है।
Our studio has done 3 interventions in the world of repoussé. The first is the choice of subjects we've chosen to represent. This skill allowed me to bring to metal visual arts which have fascinated me, from the Indian gods and goddesses to chinoiserie, Japanese cranes, more abstract modern forms. The other has been the development of the artisanal skills, and we've been able to achieve that through a lot of sampling. And third has been the scale of being able to produce such vast artworks which were never done before.
For me, scale is everything. And when he's scaling it up with such gorgeous detail, there's a fine detail even when the scale is so large. You're not losing it. He's adding more. He's adding more layers. He's adding more craft. He's showing you a whole version. It's almost like you have the deity, but then you have this whole layer of what is contemporary, what attracts. I'm so excited to see the new pieces. I'm inspired.
Everything that comes out of our studio is the result of months of teamwork. There's the research which goes on before the design is conceived, the actual design which is created, the production people involved with the process, and the artisans, the finishing of the artwork. It's a large group effort which brings some of these subjects into metal. It's not one person, it's not the work of one person. It's a big studio effort.
हमारा काम बहुत अच्छा है। जैसे हम कर रहे हैं, हम सीख रहे हैं, हम आगे चलेंगे तो और हमारी भी तरक्की होगी। इज्जत भी है, मोहब्बत भी है और कामयाबी भी है। एक अच्छा फ्यूचर भी है इस काम को करने का।
Hi, I think we have some time for a few questions from the audience, if there are any, or I'm happy to continue our conversation here on stage. So are there any hands up for questions as yet? There's one right here. Maybe start with her, please. Yeah. And we can go back to her after that.
Thank you so much. It was fascinating and really beautiful work. My question is for Dr. Lintz. I have seen sort of over the last year or so in the UK particularly, issues with museums and not kind of growing and changing with the time. I wonder how, because we've seen France doing such good work in the museum sphere, and I wonder how France has kind of taken that forward and how you feel about sort of museums' role in culture and cultural heritage.
As you can imagine, as a museum director, I'm convinced that museums are very important in the present and in the future to show and create the dialogues between the past and the present, not only the artistic dialogues, but to learn to the young generations what was the past. And it's a real challenge for us in Musée Guimet. Of course, I would like to be a sort of model, modest, but model for the future of the museums. And one thing that is very important, usually young people don't like to go to museums. They go in museums with the schools, but not like they go to the cinema or to listen to music. So for us, the challenge is to bring them in the museum through the present. To give you an example, we have to be creative for exhibitions. We will organize in 25 a big exhibition about the mangas. Of course, it's a global culture, like K-pop also. So we try to start with this present pop culture, to bring them to the past, because when you see mangas and you know Japanese art, you know that the origin is in the Japanese prints of the 18th century, 19th century. So this is a way to imagine the importance of a museum, to bring dialogue between generations, and to, if I am here today, I'm also convinced that those civilization museums are very important, and even, of course, creation. We speak about Silk Road. What is the Silk Road demonstration? It's a cultural dialogue between East and West, and we all see now in our world more and more tensions, conflicts. So I think both artists and museums have a big responsibility to create more and more dialogues in this very complex world.
We had a question right there, yeah.
Thank you for the wonderful films and the conversation. We would love to have had more. That wasn't long enough. Looking at the last wonderful film by Vikram, my question was to Yannick, that he's taken a traditional technique and he's modernized it, contemporized it. So can you give us some examples from your museum of...
Thank you for the question, because I was really in the same reaction looking at the film. What is very interesting is the tools were the same 3,000 years ago. The repoussé technique appears in Europe during the Roman Empire, and then on the east in Iran, and from Iran went to India around the 5th century with the birth of Buddhism. And so the tools are the same. One of my questions was, in your creation, I don't see the use of technology. I think the real creation and innovation of your work is the size of the work, because all what I know on repoussé in metalware that we have in the museum are always objects, decorative art objects. But what is for me fascinating in your work is the monumental size, and I can imagine the complexity of creation. So this is for me obvious. Old technology, but new vision.
The new technology comes in the design. So a lot of your research technology, the internet is, what would have taken months, you do in a couple of weeks. And then also the design, the leveling of the different shades of indentation you want, for the different levels of repoussé. wouldn't have been done, or would have been taken a much longer time without computers. So technology is coming into play.
Any more questions? Oh, there's one right here, and then we'll go to you.
I just wanted to ask Yannick a question about the Guimet, which is my favorite museum in the world and a lot of people's favorite museum. And India is well represented there. But I've heard a rumor, somebody told me that they're sitting on the best collections of Indian antiquities, and actually that they're in storage and they're not on show. And particularly there's a collection that sort of people like Vikram, like, when we're over dinner, we'll reveal sort of little glimpses. There's a collection that was Krishna Rebode's collection, which is not on display. And I would just like to know, like, about what are in those collections, and when will we eventually be able to see them? Because I think we'd love to.
To give you an idea of quantity, the Musée Guimet has a collection of 60,000 items and 600,000 old photos. We show more or less 3,000 items, not only Indian, of course, but old Asian cultures. This is a museum. That means a museum is a gallery devoted to the public, and because it's also a place to keep heritage and to build art history, we need storages. And I know it's always the question, not only of the public, why don't we see such collections that you have in your storage, but also the politicians sometimes says, we pay a lot for museums because we have mainly public museums in France. And why don't you show everything, etc. So to come back to the Indian collection, I'm very proud to say that we have one of the most important Indian art collection in Europe. Important in quality, not as I would like in quantity. Of course, we have a very nice Gupta sculptures collection, but if you go in the gallery, we have maybe 100 sculptures, sometimes masterpieces, and that's the main point of this Indian collection. And when you go on the first floor with some Krishna Rebu objects from the donation, of course the textiles, but not only, you have older modern Mughal time and the 19th century. So we have a project of extension of the museum because my team knows it. I always say we need space to show more. So this is our project for the future called Guimet 2030. And we are working a lot on this extension of the museum to show more. And maybe just to finish, for me, a museum that doesn't acquire is died. So we are very active in acquisition, and of course, as you may know, it becomes difficult to acquire in old ancient art because of the provenances, and of course we respect a lot this question. But we have some old French collections coming out on the market, and I was on the road coming here for the talk, and I had a call with a French collector that has very nice Indian sculptures. So we would like to enrich the collection with very good provenances and good quality of artworks.
Just to sort of complete the answer for you, while most of Krishna's collection is not on display, the good part is if you go to the central website of the French National Museums and you get into Musée Guimet's website particularly, all of the works are visible for us to see and look at it. So at least online it's visible, and periodically the jewelry, the textiles and the paintings are changed in rotation. So you do get, but yes, the problem of not being able to show is something that really exists. I think we have a question right here.
My question is to Vikram sir. Hello. So other than the fact that brass is a great material to work with, it's malleable, it's ductile, and it can be casted, it can be drawn into sheets, why brass? What's so special other than the sheen to it? Why brass?
Well, for all those things you said, and for me it's also, I mean, it's in our DNA since we grew up with gold being, you know, it's the whole world of gold and the color, and it's a lot more affordable. And it's very versatile as a material. I like its color. It can be treated with different colors. And there is a kind of it's a legacy product and kind of a legacy material. You know, it's rooted in history, rooted very much in our culture. We've had ritual vessels, everyday vessels, decorations in temples. So it's just something which, when I came back and started, something which resonated instantaneously. And we also have heritage. We also have craftsmen, artisans who've been working with this. So, you know, there is something to work with just in terms of a familiarity, a resonance of material. It's versatile, and there are people who you can work with on this.
And what is the future of it? It's all the new materials that coming up. What is the future of this material when it comes to different varieties of products, from home decor to furniture to lighting? So will brass sustain?
It's sustaining for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other question? Sure, please. We have time for this one last question, I think.
Yeah, very short question. Are you doing something special for the Olympics? Is your museum doing a special show?
Yes, come and join us.
I will. I'm coming.
The first event is that the Musée Guimet will stay open, which will not be the case of other museums, like the Louvre will be more or less closed, etc. So we will be open, and we will have, we have this year a Chinese season. I try to have every year or every 2 years a season devoted to a country, and India will come. We have a big project with India. But so the Chinese exhibition that we will have this summer during the Olympic Games will be about Chinese porcelain monochromes. Very original exhibition, not only academic exhibition, of course with exceptional pieces. And we will have, as I told you, the contemporary creation on the facade and inside, and a lot of activities in link with the Olympic committees coming from Asian countries. We try to organize things with Olympic committees, but more about speeches, or I dream to have some sportsmen or sportswomen coming, very famous Asian from India, from other committees coming to the museum, saying, we are not only here for sport, but come and see art also from our countries, to use them as ambassadors.
Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful audience. And thank you, Dr. Yannick, and thank you, Vikram, and for also showcasing your beautiful films and for us to get a glimpse of the Silk Road cultures and the many possibilities that continue with that culture. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.